Hey guys, this is Phil Galfond from RunItOnce.com, and I'm about to start up part 2 of a live half and half Zoom session. I got a PLO table on the left and a no limit table on the right. I wanted to get into a hand that I played in the previous video, which I just saved, and I'm starting up again in a second, and I just realized that there were a few spots in the video where I made a bet that looks pretty exploitable. And I want to just talk about it a little bit. It's a pretty small situation. I'm only going to talk about a flop bet here. But I think it's a little bit interesting and something that people who are thinking deeply enough about how to not be exploitable may not take it the next step and realize that this isn't quite as exploitable as they think it might be. So I call a raise on the button with a connected king high suit, which is a little loose here, but I'm deep enough that I'm comfortable with the call, small blind calls, and I flop a wrap on a paired board. First player checks, the preflop raiser checks to me, and I go ahead and bet $7 into 20. And as I was explaining in the video, it kind of works as like a preflop no limit squeeze play in that this player in the small blind, if he doesn't have a hand, he's a little bit handcuffed in that he can't call out of position here for a lot of reasons, but especially with a player behind him. And it's difficult for him to raise, even though this player has checked. Occasionally, this guy can wake up with a hand, and certainly I can have a hand. I would bet my stronger hands this way as well. So he's going to have to play pretty honest in this spot. So I think the $7 bet gets through him pretty frequently, and when he does check call, I think he very often has a flush draw that will fold some turns. So I actually can still make some money in that respect. If and when he folds, the preflop raiser, who's shown that he's not that interested in the pot by checking rather than c-betting, if he doesn't have a pair, I mean, I don't think he's going to fold an overpair to one bet, but potentially on the turn he could. But if he even pretend that I don't have this strong of a draw that I'm comfortable barreling with, he still, I think, folds often enough that this $7 bet into $20 shows a profit. However, if I'm betting, very frequently $7 into 20, giving them both a great price, can't they, either call and punish me, or raise and punish me and give themselves a good price on the raise? And I think the important thing to consider is that to do either of those things, the cost is not... I guess to raise fold, the cost is exactly what it seems. If I bet 7, he wants to raise to 20, he has a very good price on his bluff. It only has to work, what is that, 45% of the time, roughly. And, well, no, not even. It has to work. Whatever. You guys know the math. 43%, 42%. It doesn't have to work all that often, so he might be able to find a profitable bluff there, maybe. However, I have enough hands that I can be calling the flop with to his check raise, either with legitimate hands like a 6 or a 6-5, or a legitimate hand like queens with clubs that is at least going to call one bet. And then also have some weaker hands like this, which doesn't do well against any kind of value range, but I can defend myself from being attacked. And in addition to being able to call with all those hands, I have the ability to 3-bet bluff. So I actually don't think his raise gets through both of us at a high enough frequency, nor do I think this player's raise. I guess actually this player's raise might get through me at a high enough frequency once this guy already folds, but maybe just barely. So I don't think I'm being that exploitable in that respect. And at the same time, I obviously give myself a very good price. And then when you consider their price of calling, yes, they have excellent immediate pot odds, 7 into a pot of 27. However, they're going to get barreled at a very high frequency from my polarized range, which is very tough to profit against, because I'm going to be able to have a lot of value hands, and I'm going to be able to include semi-bluffs with equity as well as some pure bluffs, such that they still can't profitably call 3 streets. and they're just gonna have to fold very often in the future. So while I don't think either of them should be folding queens in this spot to a $7 bet, I do think that they're not printing money by calling there, and I do think that I'm not so weak, that my range is not so weak in this spot that I'm very exploitable, even if they are, focusing very hard on trying to beat me up and exploit what they perceive as a bet with a weak range, which this certainly is a bet with a weak range. I would bet 7 here with a lot of the hands that I can have in this spot. But like I said, I mean, it's PLO, so I actually will have a legitimate bet calling hand. Some very rough math would, I'd assume, maybe like a third of the time or 30% of the time, and that includes my slow plays. And then obviously I have hands like this that can call, and I can fight back some. So I think actually, we're getting up to 40-50% of the time that I'm not going to fold to a raise, assuming they don't have relevant blockers. So I don't think that this is a spot they can go too crazy exploiting me. And I know that all I did was explain a flop bet, but for 5 minutes or 6 minutes. But I think it's an important concept and one that I haven't seen talked about enough. So with that, we'll start the video up. I, as always, suggest you go back and watch my first video. We don't get much in the way of reads because this is Zoom. However, I don't know, I think it's a pretty good video. This is a little bit of a loose open, but these games have not proven crazy aggressive, so I feel comfortable with it. Decent squeeze spot, but my hand I think is a little too good in a sense. I know that sounds funny, but I'm just very happy to call with this hand closing the action and not force, and playing a three-way pot and not risk getting blown off my hand. I make a strange play and lead, and I'm going to c-bet here. This is actually questionable c-bet because the board's so connected. Ton of straight draws on that board, but it does work. Here, it's kind of a squeeze. This guy can't do much about this lead if he doesn't have a high heart or an ace, so I think he's just going to fold anytime he doesn't. I don't think he's going to bluff raise. And I think that often enough, this player won't have an ace, and he'll either check fold or he'll check call with the heart, and I can potentially get to showdown. I don't think there's any good reason to bet the turn. If the river is a heart also, and I check back, I'm gonna bluff the river because I expect him to bet a lot of his stronger, decent flushes. This is a very, very odd line that he's taken. Check calling flop and then overbet jamming river. I actually think it's a good bet size for him and his range in this spot that he wants to bet. However, I have a feeling he's not doing it properly. But I think I just have to fold. It's too likely that if he did call with just a high heart, I mean, now the king and the queen are out there, so he has me beat. Not that he's going to be bluffing, I think, with a king there, but, he could. I am going to raise get this in. I am obviously readless on this guy. However, I just think it's strong enough at 50 big blinds to get in. So yeah, the purpose of my lead there rather than my other options, I think that I guess I can open that. Just wanted to get out of the way so I can talk about this lead real quick. Alright, cool. I think it makes him fold a lot of his hands with equity against mine. Certainly a lot of his hands with equity. If he has two overs, he's folding. And he might have c-bet with those hands, or if he checks, either of them can hit their overs. And I also think that he's not going to mess around. He's pretty handcuffed. I think that if I check call against him, it's going to be very difficult to realize my equity and to see a showdown if he's a competent player at all. So I believe that lead works better. As far as how I'm going to balance that with my range, it's difficult. I think, I'll need to lead some King of Hearts X hands. I mean, I do think it's a good spot to to lead potentially like an ace queen with the queen of hearts, or to lead a nut flush, or to lead, king jack with the king of hearts. Just because I think that one of them, especially him, is going to be able to put money in with slightly worse draw, and also I just think that it gets checked through fairly often, and that's not really good for any of those strong hands. So I do think that my leading range will consist of enough strong hands to balance this out. I guess if I had the nuts, I'd be a little incentivized to check, hope that he bets and he does something other than fold, because even if they both have an ace and I'd lead, I don't think I'm getting both of them to call, whereas getting both their money in the pot, certainly if I check and they both have an ace and this guy decides to bet, this guy's going to call, and that is advantageous to me when I have a strong hand. So I'll check some of my strong hands, I'll bet some of my strong hands, and I think this hand serves very well as a lead. If I had, let's say I defended with Jack-9 with the Jack of Hearts, which I probably would not defend with, I'm just going to fold this, a little too weak. I probably would check call that hand because it's a little bit less vulnerable than this hand, and I'm not as worried about allowing a free card to hit. I'm not as worried about check calling and then having a heart hit and having to fold too frequently. That's enough about that. Note to self, next time I pause to go in depth, I'm going to pause the PLO table because I've been pausing the no limit table instead too frequently. It's a very beautiful hand. I actually love double suited paired rundowns. However, I don't think it plays great as a 3-bet. I hate to get 4-bet when I have a hand like this, so I'm just happy to call. I would rather take this hand heads up, so in later position I would always be 3-betting this hand, but against a range that's probably a little too strong for that, I think it's better just to... I guess I'll fold. This is a little close. Against a min-raise I would call. I'm going to bet with my equity. I wouldn't bet here with no equity. But I think he's giving up often enough, and the board's disconnected enough that I just take it down very often. But I can't go super crazy, so if I had no equity, I'd probably give up. I am a little out of practice with my no-limit ranges. I assume people are playing pretty tight in Zoom. I'm going to raise here in case he folds. A lot of people don't fold their big blind in this spot, which, I think is good. But if he is a folder, my hand's strong enough that, my preflop fold equity combined with my equity and playability, I think makes it a raise. And if he is defending a lot, he's going to fold this flop a good amount of the time, and I think it's a very standard c-bet there. Not much to talk about. We got a couple of pretty hands. Hand on the right prettier than the hand on the left. I think this is an overvalued hand, especially by no-limit players coming over to PLO. A lot of people would 3-bet this, and I don't think it's good to 3-bet. I'm going to go ahead and 3-bet this, though, because, well, I have aces. I'm going to call here. This is a hand that I used to overvalue because when I started learning PLO, I learned at cap, or I learned, short stacking tables. This is back when everybody short stacked. I guess everybody short stacks again now, so it's all looped back around. There was a couple year period where nobody short stacked at the 100 BB games, and everybody just played 100 BB, and that was nicer. But now I don't play the short games because it's too frustrating to play short. Speaking of which, we have some short stacks here. I'm going to limp, and here I'm going to go ahead and bet. Not a whole lot to talk about. I don't expect them to improve to hands that are going to put too much money in bad on later streets, so I'm happy to just kind of protect my hand, get a little bit of value. Interesting turn situation. I have there's a limp re-raise. I think there's probably a way to hold the control key. Liv Boree down here is telling me what to do. Hold the control key while I fold. Alright, because I want to see what's up there. This is just a bet for protection with the Queen of Hearts blocker. He potentially can check call with like Ace Queen Jack, and then it's a value bet. But he's just not going to be able to raise without the nuts there. So I get to see a showdown pretty much always. I don't think there's value in this river. There could be a little bit against Ace Jack. Where's he from? Greece. There's value against somebody from Greece, I think. I just don't think he's slow playing the turn often enough. I think that he will find a call with his ace-3, ace-jack just often enough to make this a value bet, just because I expect to be beat so rarely. But I think against a tough player, it's not a value bet. They'll be slow playing enough there, and they probably won't pay off super light, although it's not a bad spot to pay off because I could be bluffing with blockers. Oh, I didn't even get to see what happened that hand. Oh, he took it down. Alright. I'm going to isolate with a hand that plays very well heads up and decently multi-way, but I'd definitely rather take it heads up. Now we're just getting it in three-way. And I have too much equity to fold. I'm doing fine in this situation. I mean, obviously not crushing, but if you're in a backdoor boat, it'll work out. Pretty standard fold at his stack depth. I think if we were very deep, he did give me a good price, but 5-3 is just a little too weak. I'm distracted for a second, I'm sorry guys, because there's some actual PLO games starting up at 5100, which I would like to play. Let's see what we can do. Maybe swap out this PLO table for a 5100 PLO table. Give you guys, I guess that would be a little treat. It's not the same, it's not Zoom. And what I'll do, let's see. Sorry, I'm just keeping an eye on the tables to make sure that I got all of them. It looks like I have two tables, so what I'll do is bring both of them over, or bring one of them in the view of the screen, and the other one I'll bring up into your line of sight if I'm involved in a hand that's of any kind of note at all. All right. Ace King, I'm obviously going to open. I talked about in the last video, not too much in depth, but I think min raising on the button is got to be the way to go, and with a pretty wide range. I guess it doesn't have to be the way to go, but I think it's good. I'm going to be involved in two PLO hands currently. I'm going to pot double suited aces, not a whole lot else to do. I have a not super interesting situation on the other table, so I won't bother. Bring it into the screen. Not the best flop for my hand against a 3-bet and call range, although I think he should have. I'm going to call with Ace King with my outs and potentially the best hand. I think he should have enough. He should be folding enough of his King-King hands that I can go ahead and bet call this off. He should not have a lot of deuce-6 or 6-6 type hands in his preflop range. I'm going to go ahead and fold this turn, I guess. That's questionable. I do have outs. I could have the best hand. No, I think he's playing all his gutters this way. So if he does have, yeah, if he has, assuming, so he's from Canada, so he's probably decent. Assuming that he has, okay, first I don't want to slow roll him. Do I want to value jam this river? I think I might, given his bet size. Yeah, I'm going to. I mean, I think I just should anyways. It's a situation where I have so many like 3-4 type hands that are calling twice that I could opt to bluff with, that I think there's value there. Pretty standard bet here. It's just a protection bet, and I have outs when called with potentially the 4 or the King-King, but I think he's just folding the vast majority of the time. So in this situation, I called twice because I think the first call is kind of standard with my overs and, a showdownable hand. And the second call is where it gets a little dicey. But I started to think to myself, how would he play, assuming he's playing a lot of his hands from the big blind, how would he play with Queen 5, Queen 4 suited, 5-9? I think he would raise near 100% of the time with those hands. So I think he just has enough raising hands, or semi-bluff raise hands, that I can go ahead and call the turn and expect to have the best hand, and obviously, if not the best hand, to have some outs. The other thing is that he shouldn't have like a 6 for value, I assume. He might have 6-5 or ace-6 for value, which I think would be fine and good. However, I expect his only value hands to be 7 or better, which actually makes my river shove a little bit questionable. But he could certainly have like 8s, 9s, 10s, 7x. So I think that he has enough gutters. When there's a 1-card gutter possible on the board, I think people often have enough gutters in their range that if they're playing all or most of their gutters aggressively, you can find a call. And actually, just today I watched Sean LaForte's last video on bookkeeping, which was super interesting. If you guys are No Limit guys, or actually PLO guys too, I'd really highly suggest you watch it. Actually, all of his videos are great. But the concept he talked about is what he termed or coined bookkeeping, is having a good idea of your range so that you know how often you're bluffing in spots, and not just say, well, I'm going to bluff all my gutters and value bet my top pair better. Because I would suspect, looking at hand combos, assuming he's playing a lot in the big blind, that if he's going to bluff even 60% of his gutters, he's going to be too heavily weighted towards bluffs when he check raises this flop. And I suspect that a lot of people do that too frequently. Now when he bets the river, I mean, if we assume that he doesn't, it's a little bit tight, but no, it's just a fold. If we assume that he doesn't call pre-flop with 7-3 and 6-3, which he may if they're suited, but that reduces the combos. He shouldn't have a ton of two-pair hands. Obviously, he has some sets. I'm just trying to think if he calls. I think he doesn't call with his one-pair hands often enough to make up for the times that he calls with better, so I think I should have just called here. The only reason that a bet may be okay is if I was very confident that this sizing by him meant thin value, meant bluffs are thin value, and he would have either, bet closer to pot or overbet with two-pair or set. But obviously I don't know him, and I'm not confident in that read, so given the reads I had, I think I should have just called here. I think this is a little too ambitious to go for value. I think that what swayed me towards going for value is that I think if we're both playing quote-unquote optimally, and he's check-raising enough as bluffs and for value, and I'm bluffing river often enough, that he should call worse more often than he calls better, given the way the hand played out. Because in addition to like the 7x, he can actually have a jack. Like he can just have jack 9 that he was going a little crazy with, or even jack 5, I guess. So there are enough hands. Yeah, I think that in theory I made the right play, but I think in practice he's probably not going to call often enough to make that a profitable value shove. Um, 9-4 suited from the small blind. You could actually argue to wait and see, potentially either open or open limp from the small blind. I don't know how to get to it now. But I think that folding is prudent, and certainly gets me the next hand faster. I have a situation here. So I raise the button, I get squeezed by fake or real. He squeezes a lot. So even though I think actually Asian Baller has a pretty tight range here, I'm doing well enough and getting enough pot odds that I can peel in position. Awkward flop because I do have top pair, top kicker, and a gutter. I'm trying to decide if I can get it in. Here's definitely a fold. Against any value hand, I'm not doing great. However, I think there are enough semi-bluffs that I'm ahead of right now that, when I get it in against Jack 9, that sucks for me, but I still have my gutter, I still have my ace presumably. I still have running 5-5 or 7-7, which I think people undervalue. But I think, combining protecting my hand right now with the fact that I have some equity when I'm beat, and occasionally they get it in with, Queen 10-9, which I'm actually ahead of, just barely. I think that makes that a bet. This is an interesting turn spot, kind of a similar situation. I think I'm going to go ahead and bet call, mostly for protection. Yeah, I actually think that he's going to make some big folds here because I think my hand looks really strong on board this draw heavy because my range looks strong. He shouldn't expect me to call here. Shouldn't expect me to be bet folding Jack 9-6-4 with a flush draw just because I should expect him to have enough outs to continue pretty often. So when I bet smaller there, I think he's actually going to fold I think he's going to fold Ace 10-9-6, for instance, which is obviously a good result for us. Mostly, though, this is a protection bet with kind of the backup plan that I call when he shoves and kind of like shrug call. But most of the value in this bet is just protecting my hand immediately. All right, let's get back to this 1-2 no limit zoom. The interesting stuff. I certainly will open this on the button. As far as like 3-betting in this situation, it's really read dependent, and I obviously don't have any reads. I'm going to go ahead and do it right now. The main reason being we're a little bit deep, and I think that he'll be a little bit intimidated by this spot, so I think it'll just show a profit. He'll fold pre-flop often enough. If we were at 100 big blinds, I usually would not do that unless I had a read on somebody that they were opening wide and or they were folding the 3-bets a whole lot, and or they're not 4-betting. Jack 10 suited, I certainly would like to play in some fashion or another. Some people don't have cold calling ranges in the small blind. While I don't think that's a bad strategy, I personally like to have cold calls in the small blind, and this would be one of them usually. This is not a spot where I can really do anything about. I mean, I can actually cold 4-bet, and it works pretty well based on. I talked about a lot of country reads in the last video, and this would be based on a country read. I think I'm going to do it. I'm giving him a very good price, but I think that he's attacking this short stack from Portugal. So my country read is that, and no offense, but a lot of these reads are just true of the general population. Doesn't mean it's true of everybody. But players from Portugal, especially since he had a shorter stack, usually weaker players. I believe the guy at 3-bet that ISO'd was from Canada, usually stronger players. And so, yeah, I think that he's just going to have such a wide range there, and he's not going to be able to do much against my even giving him the pot odds I did. He's not going to be able to do much about it. And if he does call, I have a pretty playable hand. C-bet here. So here I'm in an interesting situation where I check called flop. His range should be pretty polarized. It's a spot where I actually like to bluff raise the turn, although I guess I don't rep much air, which is why I like to bluff raise it. I'm trying to think what he could put money in with. Probably not. This is really kind of a pure toughness play and protecting my range. I call it a toughness play because I think it just makes me tougher to play against. I don't think there's necessarily more EV in raising right there than calling, though I think it's close. The main thing is that he's going to bet twice with like aces and check it back. He also very often will bet twice with, let's say, king, queen, jack 3 and check it back, let's say on a 10 or an ace. Potentially we'll just check it back anyways. Not that an ace actually changes anything, but anyways, I feel as though I like to bluff raise this turn with the weaker portions of my range, so I would like to have some value hands in there as well, and since I take most of my king 8s and raise the flop, certainly not all of them, but most of them, I wanted to include this in my value range, and I do think that he's a tough enough player that he's capable of rebluffing me there. Obviously, I wasn't bluffing, which is the benefit of him trying to rebluff. So this is a situation where I don't really want to get it in pre-flop, but if I 3-bet, I certainly have to. I'd rather just play this post-flop. Normally offsuit hands have worse playability, which this certainly does, but at such a short stack depth, finding a hand that's going to flop top pair is your main concern, and I certainly had that. I think that by not 3-betting, I keep all of his dominated hands in, whereas when I 3-bet, he's going to fold his king nines and his queen nines, and, you know, I mean, if he's opening queen 5 suited, he's going to fold that as well. Super standard flop call. On the turn, it's actually an interesting situation. I think he doesn't expect me to fold the turn, so I actually feel comfortable folding the turn. Now we got 3 PLO tables running, so it's pretty likely you guys will see a hand. Although I will wrap up the video in 15 minutes or so. So hopefully I'll get involved in some big hands, and talking during them won't mess me up. I could definitely be convinced this is a fold, but I don't think it can be that bad. To just be opening near 100% on the button for a min raise. Just, it's very hard for them to punish you. I mean, they just have to 3-bet a lot, and they have to defend a lot, obviously, too, but it's not the worst result in the world. I think a lot of people take a situation like that where, let's just raise in a c-bet here. They take a situation like that and they say, well, it's profitable for the big blind to defend with X amount of hands, so you're making it, if your range is that weak, you're making it too profitable for him to defend. But there's already money in the pot, so it's profitable for both of you to get involved. Just because it's profitable for him doesn't mean that it's not profitable for you to be involved in the pot as well. If we were playing poker with no blinds or antes, then you should just fold every hand but aces if people are playing well, because there's no reason to get involved in the pot. The fact that there's money in the middle is the reason that we play. So I think people jump to the conclusion too often that they're making a call or a raise by their opponent profitable. But as I said, just because something's profitable for this is loose. I mean, if you guys play PLO, I don't need to tell you that. But I didn't want to call. I risk getting squeezed too often. Obviously, these games are more aggressive than the 1-2 Zoom games, and I do get squeezed often. I think that this is given that there's just not much money left, I pretty much always get to make perfect flop decisions, and I don't get blown off my equity very often, so I think I can call here with the range, even with the range imbalance. I mean, I just think it's a standard call. If I had an ace in my hand, it'd be a little bit different. Obviously, I'm going to call with my trips. So see, he does sometimes have hands that kind of dominate me. However, just with 2-to-1 pot odds, and I think a hand with pretty smooth hand with good playability, there's only the one dangler. Obviously, occasionally my flush draw will be no good, but that's a risk I'm willing to take. I'm going to go ahead and call here. It's extra nice that I have the ace, because I think that he uses the ace as a barrel card. And also, it's good to be psychic. It's a lot of what's helped me climb the ladder in poker. Interesting. Unfortunately, I don't see a lot of hands that can pay me off when the 8 pairs. If the 8 didn't pair, it would change things, but I can certainly have some bluffs here. I think in a tougher game, I would probably bet and hope he finds like an ace-high call. However, I just don't think that I don't want to have to fold this. Don't want to have to fold this either. I'm not going to fold. I'm going to 4-bet fold. I think it just plays the best. Here I'm going to call. Faker Real has a pretty wide opening range here, so in addition to being only slightly behind Towley's range... Oh, you guys can't even see the hand I'm talking about. I'm going to cold call here. So in addition to being ahead of Towley's range, Faker Real is pretty wide from the cutoff, so he's going to call with a hand that I dominate very often, so he kind of improves my pot odds, and it's just a very smooth hand. Here I'm obviously going to bet call. I mean, I'm obviously going to bet. It may not be obvious that I call, but I am going to bet call. But that's what happens most of the time. And now I find myself in a very, very difficult spot with mid-pair, gutter, jack-high flush draw. This is really the kind of stuff you want to... the kind of situation you want to avoid finding yourself in PLO. If I get it in against two pair with no draw, I'm doing excellent. If I get it in against just a king with a flush draw, I'm in pretty bad shape. So even though this looks like a hand that does very well, I think I'm leaning towards folding. I don't think Tally's bet folding and board this draw heavy. And I don't think I'm doing well enough to get it in. It feels gross, and I'm right now I'm in a medium amount of pain, but I just think that I just don't often enough. I'm never far ahead, very rarely ahead at all, and occasionally I'm just in very bad shape. And if you actually, some of the PLO guys want to run some equities there, I do think it's close, and that this fold could be a mistake, potentially. But I feel like I made the right play all around there. The more questionable hand, I think, was my cold 4-bet on the left table with the ace-king 10-4. And it's just due to the fact that I think their ranges were wide and stack situation was excellent for it. In that I'm never gonna get 4-bet light. Here's a spot where I am just gonna give up. It's a spot where my reputation for toughness on these boards does make it so that occasionally he'll just be check folding with overs, which made me kind of want to bluff. However, I just have the kind of pure bottom of my range in terms of equity, and I like to give up with those hands. Floating the turn is an option. If the turn were an offsuit 7, I probably would float with my little bit of equity and just my huge ability to rep hands on the river. It's a little ambitious to do that, but in this case with the flush draw, there are too many draws that will have missed on various rivers. A little bit of a tight fold. Not too tight, I guess. I guess we've abandoned the no-limit zoom table. Wow. No, I can handle it. Half of you guys, probably more than half of you guys, are here for the no limit anyways, so I don't want to disappoint you too badly. Here's a situation where it's actually close between potting to get it in. I don't think I can pot fold, given that he's aggro enough. Or just cold calling. I'm going to go ahead and cold call. It plays very well in a single raise pot, whether heads up or multi-way. And so I'd rather just not risk getting a lot of money in bad pre-flop. It's kind of the play I talked about at the beginning of the video. It's difficult for them to do enough to make this not profitable, in my opinion. It is. I would like to have more diamonds in my hand, like a high diamond in my hand. However, I just think it works often enough. And I believe I want to barrel off here. Let me think. I believe I want to barrel off. I think I definitely have to bet the turn. I don't have any high diamond blockers, which is very unfortunate, but if he doesn't have the nut flush draw, obviously it doesn't matter that I don't have a blocker. If he does have the nut flush draw, I'm screwed, obviously. Gonna raise here with my top set blocker. in a spot where I think he's going to stab a little bit too frequently. This is not really player dependent. I think this is just a good play all the time. It looks extra strong because this guy's short. And that's why, because now I'm priced in, so I can't really be bluffing. And now I get it in bad. Oh, not even bad. I mean bad, but not that bad. I think I probably have to give up here. If he doesn't have a flush, he has a set of jacks, which I beat unless he hit a straight as well. And I think the Genes would slow play the nut flush here. So in addition to him finding hero calls with the queen high or 10 high flush, especially because the king and the jack are out there, which makes it less likely I have it. So in addition to him finding calls with those hands, he just wakes up with, or shows up with the nut flush often enough that I just don't think I can profitably bluff. It's very interesting that he's bluffing here, that he's betting. I do think he is capable of bluffing with a set of jacks. It would be a very good play, I think. Given that the board straightened out, I think if the board were, if the river were, like a deuce, even though that brings a straight as well, I think he would just show down his hand. Trying to think if he would value bet a weaker flush than the nut flush. I guess he would value bet the second nut flush. He's giving me excellent pot odds. God, I'm tempted. No, he just has it too often, and even he's not going to bet a straight there, but a lot of his jack-jack hands are connected enough that they have, ace-queen or queen-9 in this spot, and so even though he's not betting with those hands for value, it means that his range of bluffs, which is basically jack-jack and 5-5 and 4-4, his range of bluffs, and it's usually going to be jack-jack. His range of bluffs gets narrower because a lot of those jack-jack hands are no longer in that range, and so I just think, even given the pot odds, I did consider calling, but yeah, even given the pot odds, I think that I just have to find a fold there. He would play all of his ace and queen high flushes that way, at least a large majority of the time. See, I was talking to you guys and I missed the table. Oh no, I didn't. Just my PokerStars lobby is not showing me that I'm at a table. This is just a very classic check call. If I start doing the betting or raising, I'm only going to get money in when I'm beat or flipping, basically. Basically I'll be flipping or slightly behind. But if he's doing the betting, I can get money in very, very good, and I definitely never have to fold my hand. I think that what I was going to say is I think my turn play might just be to check pot and get more value from a king. Now that the board ran off like this, I don't see any value in betting. I hate when people call me. Just FYI, guys, don't call me. There are many better ways to get a hold of me. It's probably the worst way to get a hold of me. I don't see much point in betting. He's obviously not folding any boats. He might fold a straight, but that's about it. And I don't think he has a ton of straights. So, yeah, I think there's... a bet is essentially I think the only reason people would bet there is because they're scared of letting... it's an ugly hand. It's questionable. They're scared of getting bluffed, and see, now I have to raise fold. This is an awkward situation in that I would really like to be able to play this hand, and especially I would love to be able to re-raise because yeah, I'm going to. I know this looks like I'm going very crazy, and he's actually not even he's not 3-betting such a wide range that I really want to go after him, but the stacks are too good for it, and this board nails, or this hand nails some of the boards that it looks like I miss. I'm tempted, in a sense, to check this back and shove turn. Although I think just betting now, there's 6K in the middle, and I'd like to win it. Obviously, I call it off if raised, and, I'm fine with that. I really am tempted. Nah. I think I'm going to be betting almost my whole range here, so he could even make a small bluff raise, although I don't think he will. He's obviously got a hand he's going with, but I'm flipping against pretty much anything. And, that's a fine situation for me to be in. I'm actually a favorite, I believe. And we'll chop it up. see if I can, oh, if I open Hold'em Manager, it probably won't bring up the last hand. I think he has two pair often enough that this is going to show profit. Yeah. Or like two pair or like Queen Jack even, so when the board pairs and I have the nines blocked, so I don't think he can be slow playing nearly as many straights. And look at what Hold'em Manager's doing to me. Oh man, and I got a voicemail, that's even worse. Alright, sorry for all the all this. A little bit of a loose peel, but against two very wide ranges, I think I can, and you know my pot odds in the big blind, I think I can get away with it, and I'm just going to be check folding this flop with absolutely nothing going on. My hand has nothing to do with the board. Can't even see, is this within? Yeah. I'm sorry that this got a little disjointed. This video did not happen the way that I thought it would. But I assume a lot of you will appreciate seeing some higher stakes action. Interesting situation on the left table. On the right table, I'm just going to go ahead and bet call. I could consider potting here because I don't think I'm bet folding ever. I don't have bet folding range on a board this dynamic, so I'm going to go ahead and pot, and because I think that's just best for my range. With me having the ace and the king, it makes it less likely that he has aces or kings, which are his check fold hands in that spot. So I actually think he's trapping, and I'm just going to give up with my, basically no blocker or even, like bad blocker hand in that spot. Do I get to see our equities? Yeah, I had 51%. 52%, 51.7, so very happy to get that in. I mean, him folding the flop is obviously a better result than getting it in flipping, but there's really no hand that I am unhappy to get it in with, or that I don't have the odds to get it in with there. Awkward spot with, how do I want to play this? He's short, so getting... Yeah, this plays a little better when he's short. If he was deep, I would just call here, but this hand plays really well to 3-bet against a short stack because you just flop top pair and go with it, and like they fold the flop often or they get it in slightly bad often. You rarely incorrectly have to fold. And so this is obviously a situation where I just pot and call it off. Here, I know this looks a little crazy, but I'm just going to check fold in a four-way pot. It just is not good enough of a hand, although now it's improved. I'm trying to think if there's another play besides bet small. I think actually, besides jam, I could bet small and hope that he reps the cards that I hit, or hope that he folds the turn. It's a little bit of an exploitive play, and I'm obviously getting it in against the set, which is not a hand that I wanted to see. Here, I'm still going to check fold, I guess, and that hand didn't work out for me. Here, I'm going to 3-bet with pretty weak aces out of position. Not always my standard, and actually on this board, pretty tempted to check fold without even the ace of spades in my hand. I think that's what I'll do. No reason to bet with the 8 high flush and do a four-way pot. I don't get called by worse almost ever, and I do win at showdown. So I'm probably giving up here in the middle table. I know my overlap's pretty whack right now. Sorry, guys. But yeah, I'm just going to check give up. If I had the ace of spades blocker, I certainly would not be giving up. But I have enough hands that, my range hits that board very hard, so I'm not really worried about getting exploited there. Could even consider check folding this board with this hand. It's just not that good of a hand. In that, I don't have good equity against any legitimate hands of his. If I do have the best hand, he's often not going to let me see his showdown. So I think check folding could be the best play. I think this might be a good point, unless I get involved in a hand. Yeah, this will be a good point to wrap up the video. I I hope you guys enjoyed what ended up being mostly a high stakes PLO video. I guess we got a little bit of everything. As always, let me know if you have any questions or comments or feedback. Yeah, I do try to make most of my essential videos at smaller stakes, especially because I know that our essential subscribers are smaller stakes guys. I mean, presumably even smaller than 1-2, and it's not super helpful. I mean, obviously, I think that you guys can learn a lot about hand playability and theory from the way I was playing at these tables, but obviously these are much more aggressive games than like the 10-cent, 25-cent games are going to be. So, or 50-cent. I actually don't know the average stakes played of our essential members, but I do know that if I was a 50-cent $1 player, I would sign up for Elite. I'm not trying to get you guys to upgrade, but I think the value is definitely there. But I would be an essential member if I played 10-cent, 25-cent, or 5-cent, 10-cent. Anyways, I hope you guys enjoyed. I guess I already said that. Questions, comments, all the stuff I usually say at the end of a video. You guys know what's up. And I'll see you guys in the comments thread. This is Phil Galfond for RunOnce.com. Take care.